Good evening, and welcome back to the Shadows. This is SL Tonight presents Tales That Terrify, Series 3. I'm Felix Lubezki, and tonight we step into the human jungles and treacherous bargains of John Russell's The Price of the Head. Another story Alfred Hitchcock personally selected because he knew television would never dare put it on the air.
That you wouldn't miss me.
Save that for later. A lone trader in the South Seas. Deal with headhunting natives. One simple transaction that spirals into something far more savage than anyone expected. Hitchcock called these tales too shocking for the home screen. We call them perfect for SL Tonight. Dim the lights and prepare for the cartoon that you just got to sneak through. The price is about to be paid. The possessions of Christopher Alexander Pellet were these. His name, which he was always careful to retain intact, a suit of ducks, no longer intact, in which he lived and slept, a continuous thirst for liquor, and a set of red whiskers. Also, he had a friend. Now, no man can gain friendship, even among the gentle islands of Polynesia, except by virtue of some quality attaching to him. Strength, humor, villainy, he must show some trait by which the friend can catch and hold. How then explain the loving devotion lavished upon Christopher Alexander Pellet by Karaki, the company boat boy? This was the mystery at Fufuti. There was no harm in Pellet. He never quarreled. He never raised his fist. Apparently he never learned that a white man's foot, though it wobbled ever so, is given him wherewith to kick natives out of the road. He never even cursed anyone except himself and the Chinese half-caste who sold him brandy, which was certainly allowable because the brandy was very bad. On the other hand, there was no perceptible good in him. He had long lost the will to toil, and latterly even the skill to beg. He did not smile, nor dance, nor exhibit any of the amiable eccentricities that sometimes recommend the drunken to a certain toleration. In any other part of the world he must have passed without a struggle, but some chance had drifted him to the beaches where life is as easy as a song, and his particular fate had given him a friend. And so he persisted. That was all. He persisted, a sodden lump of flesh preserved in alcohol. Karaki, his friend, was a heathen from Bougainville, where some people are smoked and others eaten. Being a black, a Melanesian, he was as much an alien in brown Fufuti as any white. He was a serious, efficient little man, with deeply sunken eyes, a great mop of kinky hair, and a complete absence of expression. His tastes were simple. He wore a red cotton kerchief belted around his waist, and a brass curtain ring suspended from his nose. Some powerful chief in his home island had sold Karaki into the service of the trading company for 3 years, annexing his salary of tobacco and beads in advance. When the time should be accomplished, Karaki would be shipped back to Bougainville, a matter of some 800 miles, where he would land no richer than before, except in experience. This was the custom. Karaki may have had plans of his own. It is seldom that one of the black races of the Pacific shows any of the virtues for which subject populations are admired. Fidelity and humility can be exacted from other colors between tan and chocolate, but the black remains inscrutable savage. His secret heart is his own, hence the astonishment of Fufuti, which knew the ways of black recruits, when Karaki took the worthless beachcomber to his bosom. "Hey you, Johnny," called Moy Jack, the Chinese half-caste. "Better you come catch this fellow monster belong to you. You fellow plenty too much to drink, Gallo." Karaki left the shade of the copra tree, the shed, where he had been waiting for an hour or more, and came forward to receive the sagging bulk that was thrust out of doors. He took it scientifically by wrist and armpit and swung toward the beach. Moy Jack stood on his threshold, watching with cynic interest. "Aye, you," he said. "What name you make so much bubbly long that fella master? Suppose you bling me all them fella pearls. He pay you one damn fella good trade, by word." It annoyed Moy Jack that he had to provide the white man with a daily drunk in exchange for this little seed pearls with which Pellet was always flush. He knew where those pearls came from. Crocky didn't forbid him diving in the lagoon to get them. Moy Jack made a good thing of the traffic, but he could have made a much better thing by trading directly with Crocky for a few sticks of tobacco. "What name you give that fella master all them fella pearls?" he demanded Moy Jack offensively. "He plenty too much no good, Gallo. Close up, he die altogether." Crocky did not reply. He looked at Moy Jack once, and the half-caste trailed off in the mutterings. For an instant there showed a strange light in Crocky's dull eyes, like the flat, green flicker of a turning shark glimpsed 10 fathoms down. Crocky bore his charge down the beach to the little thatched shelter of pandanus leaves that was all his home. Tenderly he eased Pellet to a mat, pillowed his head, bathed him with cool water, brushed the filth from his hair and whiskered. Pellet's whiskers were his true whiskers, the kind that sprout like barbels of a catfish, and they were a glorious coppery, sun-gilt red. Crocky combed them out with a sandalwood comb. Later he sat by with a fan and kept the flies from the bloated face of the drunkard. It was a little past midday when something brought him scurrying into the open. For weeks, he had been studying every weather sign. He knew that the change was due when the southeast trade begins to harden through this flawed belt of calms and crosswinds. And now, as he watched, the sharp shadows began to blur along the sands and a film crept over the face of the sun. All Fafudi was asleep. The houseboy snored in the back veranda. Under his netting, the agent dreamed happily of big copper shipments and bonuses. Moy Jack dozed among his bottles. No one had been mad enough to stir abroad in the noon hour of repose. Nobody but Crocky, the untamed black, who cared nothing for custom, not yet for drink. The light pad of his steps was lost in surf drone on the barrier reefs. He flitted to and fro like a wraith. And while Fafudi slept, he applied himself to a job for which he had never been hired. And I'll take that moment to say, are you enjoying the story so far? Hopefully you are. Remember, this story is from a past time, so inevitably you can see why they were afraid to put it on TV. You know, just the simple fact of everything that's inside the story itself. Could you see them adapting that to something on TV today? I can't. Either way, that's why it resides here on SL tonight. But in the interim, we have a cartoon. Enjoy.
I am a soul of endless sorrow. I've known hard times through all my years. I'm leaving now, my native homeland, the state where I first saw the light. For many years I've faced such hardship, no joy on earth has come my way. In this wide world I'm forced to wander, no friends remain to ease my pain. He's a soul of endless sorrow. He's a soul a soul of endless sorrow. Your mother claimed that you wouldn't miss me. Your sister said you'd cry for me. Your father warned you'd be so lonely when I am gone across the sea. He's a soul of endless sorrow. He's a soul of endless sorrow.
Well, hopefully you enjoyed that. Two friends wanting to go off and have a good time because of prohibition. And, well, that happened. Hopefully you enjoyed the Midnight Odyssey. Let's get back to the story. While Fafudi slept, he applied himself to a job for which he'd never been hired. Karaki had long ago ascertained two vital facts: where the key to the trade room was kept and where the rifles and ammunition were hidden. He opened the trade room and selected 3 bolts of turkey red cloth, a few knives, 2 cases of tobacco, and a fine small axe. There was much else he might have taken as well, but Karaki was a man of simple tastes and efficient. With the axe, he next forced the rifle chest and removed therefrom 1 Winchester and a big box of cartridges. With the axe again, he broke into the boat sheds. Finally, with the axe, he smashed the bottoms out of the whale boat and 2 cutters so they would be of no use to anyone for many days to come. It was really a very handy little axe, a true tomahawk, ground to a shaving edge. Karaki took a workman's pleasure in its keen, deep strokes. It was almost his chief prize. On the beach lay a big proa, a stout outrigger canoe of the kind Karaki's own people used at Bougainville, so high of prow and stern as to be nearly crescent-shaped. The northwest monsoon of last season had washed it ashore at Fafudi, and Karaki had repaired it by the agent's own order. This proa he now launched in the lagoon, and aboard it he stored his loot. Of supplies, he had to make a hasty selection. He took a bag of rice and another of sweet potatoes. He took as many coconuts as he could carry in a net in 3 trips. He took a cask of water and a box of biscuit. And here happened an odd thing. In his search for biscuit, he came upon the agent's private store of liquor, a dozen bottles of rare Irish whiskey. He glanced at them and passed them by. He knew what the stuff was, and he was a savage, a black man, but he passed it by. When Moy Jack heard of that later, he remembered what he had seen in Karaki's eyes and ventured the surprising prediction that Karaki would never be taken alive. When all was ready, Karaki went back to the thatch and aroused Christopher Alexander Pellet. "Hi, master, come along me." Mr. Pellet sat up and looked at him. That is to say, he looked. Whether he saw anything or not belongs among the obscure questions of psychopath. "Too late," said Mr. Pellet profoundly. "The shop is closed. Copy, boy. Give all those damn loafers good night. I'm going bed." Whereupon he fell flat on his back. "Wake up, master," insisted Karaki, shaking him. "You too much strong fell asleep. Hiya, master. Rum. You like 'em rum?" "Word. Plenty rum, master." But even this magic call, which never failed to rouse Pellet from his couch in the mornings, fell now on deaf ears. Pellet had had his skinful, and the fitness of things decreed that he should soak the flock around. Rocky knelt beside him, pried him up until he could get a shoulder under his middle, and lifted him like a loose bag of meat. Pellet weighed 150 pounds, Rocky not much more than 100. Yet in some deft coolie fashion of his own, the little black man packed his burden, with the feet dragging behind, clear down to the beach. Moreover, he managed to get it aboard the proa. Pellet was half drowned, and the proa half swamped, but Rocky managed. No man saw their departure, the foodie still dreamed on. Long before the agent awoke to wrath and ruin, his clear crescent craft had slipped from the lagoon and faded away on the wings of the trade. That first day, Karaki had all he could do to keep the proa running straight before the wind. Big smoky seas came piling up out of the southeast and would have piled aboard if he had given them the least chance. He was only a heathen who did not know a compass from a degree of latitude. But his forefathers used to the people of these waters on the cockleshell's voyages that make the venture of Columbus look like a rise in a fairy tale. Rocky bailed with a tin pan and sailed with a mat and steered with a paddle, but he proceeded. Along about sunrise, Mr. Pellet stirred in the bilge and raised a pea-green face. He took one bewildered glance overside at the seething waste and collapsed with a groan. After a decent interval, he tried again, but this was an illusion that would not pass, and he twisted around to Karaki sitting crouched and all aglisten with spray in the stern. "Rum!" he demanded. Karaki shook his head, and a haunted look crept into Pellet's eyes. Take away all that stuff," he begged pathetically, pointing at the ocean. Thereafter, for 2 days, he was very, very sick, and he learned how a small boat in any kind of a sea can move 47 different ways within one and the same minute. This is no trifling bit of knowledge, as those who have acquired it can tell. It was nearly fatal to Pellet. On the third day, he awoke with a mouth and a stomach full of fumed leather and a great weakness, but otherwise in command of his few faculties. Yea, sobered his ass up. The gale had fallen, and Karaki was quietly preparing fresh coconut. Pellet quaffed two before he thought to miss the brandy with which his breakfast draught was always laced. But when he remembered the milk choked in his throat, he like 'em rum. Oh, got 'em rum. Pellet looked forward and aft to windward and to lee. There was a great deal of horizon in sight, but nothing else. For the first time, he was aware of a strangeness in events. "What name you come so far?" he asked. "We catch 'em one big fellow wind," explained Karaki. Pellet was in no condition to question his statement, nor to observe from a careful stalking of the proa that they had not been born to sea on a casual fishing trip. Pellet had other things to think of. Some of the things were pink and others purple, and others were striped like rainbow and most surprising designs, and all were highly novel and interesting. They came thronging up out of the vast deep to entertain Christopher Alexander Pellet. They did. You cannot cut off alcohol from a man who has been continuously pickled for 2 years without results more or less picturesque. These were days when the proa went shouting across the empty southern seas to madrigal and cork song. Tied hand and foot and lashed under a thwart, Pellet raved in the number of his innocent youth. It would have been singular hearing that had there been any to hear, but there was only Karaki. He did not care for the lesser cavalier poets, and on whom whole pages of Atalanta and Calydon were quite wasted. Now and then he threw a dipper full of seawater over the white man, or spread a mat to keep the sun from him, or fed him with coconut milk by force. Rocky was a poor audience, but an excellent nurse. Also, he combed Pellet's whiskers twice every day. I think he did it just so he could brush his hair. They ran into calms, but the trade picked them up again more gently, so that Karaki ventured to make westing, and they fled under skies as bright as polished brass. My heart is within me, as an ash in the fire. Whosoever hath seen me, without lute, without lyre, shall sing of me grievous things, even things that were ill to desire. Thus chanted Christopher Alexander Pellet, whose face began to show a little more like flesh, and a little less like rotten kelp. Whenever a fair chance offered, Karaki landed on a lee of some one of the tiny islets with which the Santa Cruz region is peppered, and would make shift to cook rice and potatoes in the tin dipper. This was risky, for one day the islet proved to be inhabited. Two white men in a cutter came out to stop them. Karaki could not hide his resemblance to a runaway black man with a gun. He left the cutter sinking and one of the men dead. "There's a bullet hole alongside me here," said Pellet from under the thwart. "You better plug it." Karaki plugged it and released his passenger. "Hey, Pellet, plug it yourself." Yeah. He stretched himself with a certain naive curiosity of his own body. "So you're real," observed Pellet, staring hard at Karaki. "By George, you are, and that's comfort." He was right. Karaki was very real. "What side you taking this fella canoe?" "Baladi," said Karaki, using the native word for bougainville. Pellet whistled. An 800-mile evasion in an open boat was a considerable undertaking. It enlisted his respect. Moreover, he had just emphatic proof of the efficiency of this little black man. "Dalby all some home belong you?" "Yes." "All right, Commodore," said Pellet. "Lead on. I don't know why you shipped me for supercargo, but I'll see you through." Strangely, or perhaps not so strangely, the whole Fafudi interval of his history had been fading from his brain while the poison was ebbing from his tissues. The Christopher Alexander Pellet that emerged was one from earlier years, pretty much of a wreck. It was true, an effectless, indolent, paltry creature at best, but ordinarily human and rather more than ordinarily intelligent. He was very feeble at first, but Karaki's diet of coconuts and sweet potatoes did wonders for him, and the time came when he could rejoice in the good salt taste of the spray on his lips and forget for hours together the crazy craving for stimulant. They made a strange crew. This pair of simple savage and convalescent drunkards, but there were never any question as to who was in command. That was well seen in the third week when their food began to fail, and Pellet noticed that Karaki ate nothing for a whole day. "See here, this won't do," he cried. "You've given me the last coconut and kept none for yourself." "Me no like a meat," said Karaki shortly. Christopher Alexander Pellet pondered many matters in the long, idle hours, while the rush of foam under the proa and the creak and fling of her outriggers were the only sounds between the sea and sky. Sometimes his brow was knotted with pain. It is not always pleasant to be wrenched back into level contact with one's memories. Thoughts are no sweeter company for having long been drowned. He had met the horrors of delirium. He had now to face the livelier devils of his past. He had fled them before. But here was no escape of any kind. So he turned and grappled with them and laid them one by one. When they'd been at sea 29 days, they had nothing left of their provisions but a little water. Karaki doled it out by moistening a shred of coconut husk and giving Pellet the shred to suck. In spite of the Pellet's petulant protest, he would take none himself. Again the heathen nursed the derelict, this time through the last stages of thirst, scraping the staves of the cask and feeding him the ultimate drop of moisture on the point of a knife. On the 36th day from Fafudi, they sighted Choi Sul, a great green wall that built up slowly across the west. Once fairly under its headlands, Karaki might have indulged a certain triumph. He had taken as his target the whole length of the Solomons, some 600 miles. But to have fetched the broadside of them anywhere in such a craft as the proa, through storm and current, without instrument of chart, was distinctly a feat of navigation. Karaki, however, did no celebrating. Instead, he stared long and anxiously over his shoulders into the east. The wind had been fitful since morning. By noon it was dead calm on a restless, oily sea. A barometer would have told evil tales, but Karaki must have guessed them anyway, for he staggered forward and unstepped the little mast. Then he bound all his cargo securely under the thwarts and put all his remaining strength into the paddle, heading for a small outpost island where a line of white showed beach. They had been very lucky thus far, but they were still 2 miles offshore when the first rush of the hurricane caught them. Crocky himself was reduced to a rattle of bones and a dried skin, and Pellet could scarcely lift a hand. But Crocky fought for Pellet among the waves that leaped up like sheets of fire on the reef. Why or how they got through, neither could have said. Perhaps because it was written that after drink, illness, madness, and starvation, the white man should be saved by the black man again, and the last time from ravening water. When they came ashore on the islet, they were both nearly flayed, but they were alive, and Crocky still gripped Pellet's shirt. For a week they stayed, while Pellet fattened on unlimited coconut, and Crocky tinkered the proa. It had landed in a waterlogged tangle, but Crocky's treasures were safe. He got his bearings from a passing native fisherman, then he knew that all his treasures were safe. Home Island lay across Bougainville Strait, a stretch of water just beyond. "I'll be over there?" asked Hewitt. "Yes," said Crocky. "And a mighty good thing, too," cried Pellet heartily. "This is the limit of British authority, old boy. Big fellow master belong Barrowtane stop him here, no can go that side." Crocky was quite aware of it. He feared one thing in the world. He feared the Fiji High Court and its resident commissioner of the Southern Solomons. He did sure justice upon all who transgressed in its jurisdiction. Once beyond the strait, he might still be liable for the stolen goods and the broken contract. But never this was the point. Never could he be punished for anything he might choose to do over there in Bougainville. So Crocky was content. And so was Christopher Alexander Pellet. His body had been wrung and swept and scoured, and he had downed his devils. Sweet air and sunshine were on his lips and in his heart. His bones were sweet in him. As his vigor returned, he swam the lagoon and helped Crocky at the proa. He would spend hours hugging the warm sand or rejoicing in the delicate traceries of some tiny seashell, singing softly to himself while the groundswell hushed along the beach, savoring life as he never had done. "Oh, this is good, good," he said. Crocky puzzled him. Not that he vexed himself, for a smiling wonder at everything, almost childlike, filled him these days. But he thought of this taciturn savage, how he had capped thankless service with the rarest sacrifice, and now that he could consider soberly, the why of it eluded him. Why? Affection? Friendship? Must be so. And he warmed towards the silent little man with the sunken eyes, and the expressionless face from which he could never raise a wink. "Hiya, Crocky. What name you no laugh all same me? What? You too much fright along that fella stuff you steal? Forget it, you old black scamp. If they ever trouble you, I'll square 'em somehow. By George, I'll say I stole it myself." Crocky only grunted and sat down to clean his Winchester with a bit of rag and some drops of oil he'd crushed from a dried coconut. "No, that don't reach 'em either," murmured Pellet, baffled. "I'd like to know what's going on under that topknot of yours, old chap. They're like Kipling's cat that walks by himself. God knows I'm not ungrateful. I wish I could show you." He sprang up. "Crocky, you one big fellow along you. Save? You one big fellow friend along me. Savee? We two damn big fellow friend, me word." "What?" "Yes," said Crocky. No other response. He looked at Pellet, and he looked away towards Bougainville. "Yes," he said. "My word," and went on cleaning his gun, the Black Islander, inscrutable, incomprehensible, and an enigma always, to the end. The end came 2 days later at Bougainville. Under a gorgeous dawn, they came into a bay that opened before their prow as with jeweled arms of welcome. The land lay lapped in bright garments like a sleeper half awakened, all flushed and smiling, sensuous, intimate, thrilling with life, breathing warm scents. These were some of the foolish phrases Pellet babbled to himself as he leaped ashore and ran up on a rocky point to see and to feel and to draw all the charm of the place to himself. Meanwhile, Crocky, that simple and efficient little man, was proceeding methodically about his own affairs. He landed his bolts of cloth, his tobacco, his knives, and the other loot. He landed his box of cartridges and his rifle and his fine tomahawk. The goods were somewhat damaged by seawater, but the weapons had been carefully cleaned and polished. Pellet was declaiming poetry aloud to the alluring solitude when he was aware of a gentle footfall, and turned, surprised to find Karaki standing just behind him with a rifle at his hip and axe in his hand. "Well," said Pellet cheerfully, "what do you want, old chappie?" "Me like," said Karaki, while there gleamed in his eyes the strange light that Moy-Jack had glimpsed there, like the flicker of a returning shark. "Me like 'em too much one fella head belong you." "What? Head? Whose? My head?" "Yes," said Karaki simply. That was the way of it. That was all the mystery. Savage had fallen enamored of the head of the beachcomber, and Christopher Alexander Pellet had been betrayed by his fatal red whiskers. "Told ya!" In Karaki's country, a white man's head, well smoked, is a thing to be desired above wealth, above lands and chiefship's fame, and the love of women. In all of Karaki's country was no head like the head of Pellet. Therefore, Karaki had served to win it with the patience and simple faith of a Jacob. For this he had schemed and waited, committed theft and murder, expended sweat and cunning, starved and denied himself, nursed, watched, tended, fed, and saved his man that he might bring the head alive and on the hoof, so to speak, to the spot where he could remove it at leisure and enjoy the fruits of his labor and safety. Pellet saw all this at a flash, understood it so far as any white could understand, the whole elemental and stupendous simplicity of it. And standing there in his new strength and sanity, under the fair promise of the morning, he gave a laugh that pealed across the waters and started the seabirds from their cliffs. The deep-throated laugh of a man who fathoms and accepts the last great jest. For finally, by corrected list, the possessions of Christopher Alexander Pellet were these: his name still intact, the ruins of some rusty ducks, his precious red whiskers, and a soul which had been neatly recovered, renewed, refurbished, reanimated, and restored to him by his good friend Karaki. Thou shallest die as he dies, for whom none sheddeth tears, filling thine eyes and fulfilling thine ears with the brilliance, the bloom, and the beauty. Thus chanted Christopher Alexander Pellet over the waters of the bay, and then whirled, throwing wide his arms. "Shoot, damn you! It's cheap at the price." And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how you pay the price of the head, and still lose everything. John Russell took a simple barter in the South Seas and turned it into one of the most coldly ironic tales in the entire Hitchcock anthology. No monsters, no vampires, just human nature at its most savage. Television was never going to touch this one, but here at SL Tonight, we don't flinch. Next week, we continue the Forbidden Collection with the next hand-picked nightmare. Hugh Patrick's Love Comes to Miss Lucy. Until then, this has been SL Tonight Presents Tales That Terrify. We are where the nightmares go. Good night. Like, comment, subscribe. And remember, good hunting and good night.